What's up, everybody? It's the Daily Fantasy Show brought to you by DFO. I'm Josh. It is, what day of the week is it? It is Thursday, October 26th. Adam's internet is being a tad wonky, so I will be riding solo again today. We got an 11 game slate, lots of good spots, lots of early games, only two late games, really. That's kind of nice. So let's just hop right to it. First game of the night, we have the San Jose Sharks traveling to Boston to face the Bruins. News there, I'm not sure if Krejci's going to be back. He might be a game time decision. I am not sure. Boston is getting healthier. San Jose is finally getting some scoring. Couture has been on fire. I'm not sure. I think both teams are middle of the road for me. Bergeron's probably going to go up against the top line of the Sharks tonight. So if I'm going to have anybody from this game, it's probably going to be Boston, the Bergeron line. They're 19,000. They're 19,000 to stack on DK. A little bit more on FanDuel, I believe. Not that that matters on FanDuel because you can almost fit anybody you want if you try hard enough. So yeah, I'll go. Middle of the road interest for both teams here, but if you want to use Bergeron, Marchand, that line, I have Anders Bjork. You want to go there, it's fine. Krug, 5,000. He's getting cheaper. I think I prefer McAvoy 4,300 if you're going to use the Bruins. Again, middle of the road interest for Boston. On the flip side, I have less interest in the Sharks tonight. I just think with Boston getting healthier, even though Rask isn't back yet, I just think they're getting better defensively, and I think there's better spots tonight all around. If you want to use a Couture single bullet, okay. You want to fit in Burns, cool. I think if you want to spend up, I think there's other spots to spend up. You want to use Hurdle, 4,500 with Couture and Tim Heed. Okay, again, this game to me middle of the road, especially on this big of a slate. Martin Jones 7,500. Again, middle of the road for me. Kudobin, 7,400, middle of the road. You want to use them in GPPs, okay. I think I'd avoid them in cash. So let's move on to the second game of the night. We have the Carolina Hurricanes traveling to Toronto to face the Maple Leafs. Again, this is more of a middle of the road for me as well. I do have some more interest in this game compared to the first game, more specifically for one-offs or mini stacks. Just like I said before, Carolina is a much better team defensively than most of the teams that Toronto are facing. So have faced. If you want to, my preferred play, if you're going to go there, use like a Matthews Nylander mini stack. And then on the flip side, if you want to use Skinner as a one-off, he's someone I would use as a one-off. But stacking as a whole, I think the guys I mentioned are more, you can use them in GPPs as a mini or single bullet. There, you can use them in cash. Again, this is more middle of the road for me. There's some other spots I like more. I won't blame you if you use the Maple Leafs because they're in play almost every night. Again, they're just like we talked about when the Stars are playing, or excuse me, the Lightning were playing Carolina. That line's like the Stamkos line is almost matchup proof. The same could be said for Matthews. He's almost matchup proof. So obviously he's a viable option. Again, I think there's better places to go tonight, but Matthews Even though he is 7,800, I think he's definitely in play in any format. Goalies in this game. I believe Freddie Anderson's going to start at 7,800. He's always a GPP play for me. He's always in consideration. Scott Darling, 6,900. Not really a fan. Toronto can put up goals in bunches. If you want to take a GPP flyer on him, he's probably going to be very low owned. I can see that there. Sorry for the kids' music over there. Avery's playing, but if I'm going to use a D-man, I want Riley, 5,100 for the Leafs. For the Canes, again, you could pay up for Justin Falk. He's only 4,800, but I prefer Jacob Slavin at 3,700. I think he's the better play. So let's move on to the third game of the night. We have the Arizona Coyotes traveling to New York to face the Rangers. Aiden Hill against Andre Pavlik. Good God. Also, Derek Stefan, revenge narrative. Back in New York after getting traded for the 7th pick in Tony DeAngelo. Tony DeAngelo's in the minors. Elias Anderson, who they drafted, is still in Europe, so that trade makes no sense to me as a Rangers fan, but here we are. The Rangers mix up their lines a little bit. Their top line is now Mika Zibanejad, Rick Nash, and JT Miller, and I love that line. I want exposure to that top line. Also, Mika Zibanejad is 7,200. That's kind of expensive, so... But the line as a whole isn't too bad. You can get them in with Shattenkirk. Now that DeAngelo got sent down, I believe Brady Shea is going to see some power play 2 minutes. And he's 3,400. He's a good play. The third line, I guess, well, no, the Kevin Hayes will be the third line. The second line interests me. Descharnais, Kreider, and Zuccarello. I mean, if you don't want to use Davey, that's fine. Again, Shattenkirk and Shea are in play for me. You want to use McDonough too. He's usually the lower owned of between Shattenkirk and McDonough. This music's ridiculous. On the flip side, with Pavlik and net and the Rangers being terrible, I definitely want some exposure to the top line. Derek Stefan, Keller, and Domi. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's 4,400. That's still too cheap. You want to use him? Cool. Jason Demers is still on the power play, 3,200. He's in play. Definitely, that's a line where you can save some salary. They're in a good matchup. Maybe they get overlooked, but it's Pavlik. He's not good. Again, this is a high interest spot for me because Pavlik's terrible. Aiden Hill is young, unproven. Coyotes haven't won a game yet this season. The Rangers have won 1 or 2. So again, New York Rangers any of the top 3 lines are in play for the Rangers for me. Preference to me would be Rangers 1, which they changed again, which is Zibanejad, Nash, and JT Miller. And the second line, David Descharnais, Chris Kreider, and Zook, or Hayes, Fost, and VC. But obviously, it'd go in that order for me for the Rangers. Top line for Arizona, definitely in play for me. If you can fit Oliver Ekman-Larsson, do it. If you can't, Jason Demers. Goalies, no interest in this game. None. Not even as like leverage. So they're down at the bottom of the list. Let's move on to the next game, which is, I feel like, it's going to be another popular target for everybody. The Winnipeg Jets traveling to the Pittsburgh Penguins to face Pittsburgh to face the Penguins. It's going to be Matt Murray against Connor Hellebuck. Again, both sides of this game interest me. Pittsburgh's always in play. This is a good spot for them. Winnipeg's very bad on the PK. They're also pretty poor defensively. Pittsburgh, on the flip side, is pretty poor defensively, even though their last game was low scoring. So to me, for let's talk about Winnipeg first. Um, I think for me, the preferred play is going to be the second line. They're probably, well, if you look at 80's line matching article that's coming out, and Pittsburgh doesn't really match up too much at home, so I don't think the Crosby line will be primarily up against the Wheeler-Scheifele line, so you can use them, but still my preferred play is Little, Ehlers, and Laine. They're expensive. I mean, Little does provide some salary relief at 4,600, which is nice, but they're my preferred play tonight for Winnipeg. Scheifele, Wheeler and Kyle Connor still on the top line, also in play. Connor is 4,000 on DK, provides some nice salary relief. But again, my preferred play, if you're using Winnipeg, is the second line. On the blue line, if you want to fit Bufflin in at 5,600. God, this music. Avery, can you shut this off? If you want to use Bufflin, you can at 5,600. Can you shut this music off? Okay. If you want to use Josh Morrissey for some salary relief at 3,500, cool. He's on the top pair with Bufflin and sees some minutes. You want to take a stab at Trouba at 4,900, also in play. I think Hellebuck at 7,100 is obviously... What? Okay. We'll leave it on then. So Hellebuck at 7,100, definitely not even close to being a cash game play. However, if you want to use them as leverage in a GPP, I think you can. Again, that could blow up and it could be disastrous, but you're going to get Hellebuck at like 2% maybe. Pittsburgh puts a lot of shots on net. Obviously, it's not a preferred play for me. We'll get to some of my favorite goalies later, but if you're fading Pittsburgh and you want to leverage a spot, I think Hellebuck's possibly the place to do it. If you're making 20 lineups, maybe 1 or 2 lineups with Hellebuck. I mean, other than that, no. Again, now let's get to the Penguins. Winnipeg power play is not very good. The top 2 lines are in play for me. Again, I don't like how the Pittsburgh power play is over 3 even strength lines, with Hornquist being on the 3rd line. You want to power play stack the Penguins? You can. You'd have to get creative to fill out the rest of your lineup. Power play 1 is Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, Hornquist, and thank you, buddy, and Letang. You can do that. But again, my preferred play, if you're going for a line stack, would be the second line, which is Malkin, Rust, and Kessel. If you want to leave Rust off because he's not on the power play, okay. And it probably lets you fit in Letang. Obviously, the Crosby line's always in play. Crosby, Gensel, and Sheary. Again, those 2 are on power play 2. Crosby's on power play 1. So it doesn't really correlate too much, but, that on special teams at least. But on even strength, they're going to obviously play together. If you can fit Letang, I'd go for it. He's 6,200. I think Chad Rudewell is power play 2. You have to check daily face-off. He could be an interesting punt at 2,900, unless it's Ole Mata, and then I'd go Ole Mata at 4,200. Matt Murray, 7,900. He always gets a little bit of ownership. He doesn't really interest me too much. This game has a high over-under. And paying that price for him doesn't really interest me too much. You want to use him in GPP because you're using Penguins. Cool. Cash, I would avoid him. Not one of my top GPP goalies, but he's always viable when using the Penguins in a GPP. So let's move on to the next game of the night. We got the LA Kings going to Montreal to face the Canadiens. Looks like Adrian Kempe is moving up to the second line with Pearson and Toffoli. That line does interest me. Kempe is cheap, 4,000. Toffoli is 5,200. Pearson's 4,200. That line's very cheap. So if you're not using Carey Price, that's a good spot to save some salary. The Kings still have yet to lose in regulation. The Canadiens have been very up and down this season. Looks like Carey Price may have started to figure it out last game, which is why Carey Price is one of my preferred plays tonight since he's still really cheap. Yes, I'm going back there. Yes, it could end horribly, but for the price and him starting to figure it out, I think you have to take a chance. Again, if you want to use Kopitar, I'm not a huge Dustin Brown fan. He's up to 6,000, which is ridiculous. If you want to use the top one, okay, it's not one of my favorites. Doughty, 6,100 is expensive, but he could be worth it. You want to go there. Instead of Letang, I probably prefer Letang. You want to save some salary, Jake Muzzin, Alec Martinez, 4,600 and 4,500. That's the spot to go. Oscar Fantenberg on power play 2, 3,100 if you really want to dig deep there. Again, Kings aren't too high up on the list, but again, that second line with Kempe, Pearson, Toffoli do allow you to save some salary, get in some more expensive lines. And, the Canadiens have been really up and down. So if you get a bad Canadiens team tonight, then, you can get that line. Maybe at pretty low ownership, probably because Carey Price is going to get some ownership tonight because he did put it together. Not completely. I mean, he only gave up one goal. He scored like 7.4 DK points, something like that. But at his price, after a win, he's probably going to have some pretty, I wouldn't say significant ownership, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him 10, 15%. On the Canadian side, did they mix up their lines? Or is they still the lines from I wrote it down, but I don't know what I did with the paper. Anyway, I'm not sure my interest. It's more middle of the road for me for Montreal tonight. Not a huge fan. I do like Duran and Pacioretty together. You want to mini stack them with Shea Weber. Shea Weber ended up being like the play for defenseman on Tuesday. He's only 5,500. Besides Josie on Tuesday, Roman Josi and Shea Weber together. But if you want to use Weber with Duran and Pacioretty, okay. Again, middle of the road for me. Not really interested them in cash. It'd be GPP only. That's really the only defenseman I have interest in Montreal. You want to punt Jeff Petrie. Okay, 3,300. That's about it. Brandon Gallagher, if you want to use a one-off, that's somewhere you can go. Galchenyuk, depending on the line. Again, he's still super cheap. But, middle of the road interest for me in this game. So let's move on to the next game. We got the Philadelphia Flyers traveling to Ottawa to face the Senators. Looks like it's going to be Neuwirth in net for the Flyers. I have interest there. Craig Anderson in net for the Sens. I do have a little bit of interest there. Looks like Kyle Turris is out sick. He's going to be out the next few games. That makes me kind of lean towards Philadelphia top line a little bit. Couturier, Giroux, and Voracek. I think Voracek leads the NHL in assists. They're going to see probably the Broussard line. You check Adams' line matching article. They're going to see a whole bunch of Carlson, but I still will lean the Flyers in this game, especially that top line. Simmons' game time decision. He did skate this morning. I don't really have too much interest in that second line. Looks like Ghost and Provorov are together. If you can fit Ghost, if you're using the Flyers to make it a four-man stack, that's probably my preferred choice. You want to use Gudas at 3,100 or Sanheim even at 3,000 if you're getting desperate. Okay. Again, Flyers are not one of my top spots. More middle of the road again, maybe creeping up towards, the top of the middle of the road. If you want to use, I think Patrickson, I mean, I have no interest in him, but I think they'll keep the lines intact. Fipla, 4,500. Not really a huge fan, but again, plays the Braden Shen spot on the power play. On the Sen side, if you're not using Neuwirth, who is someone I want to target in GPPs, I want to use him in GPPs. But if you're not using him, I think the Broussard Stone line is the way to go. I wish Hoffman would move up there. But you can mini them with Carlson. Carlson 7,200 is expensive, but he sees a million minutes. It's on the power play. Obviously, I don't have to talk him up any. You want to use Hoffman as a one-off. Okay, I would make sure to check the lines because you never know what Guy Boucher does when someone's out. He could completely flip-flop some lines, but Broussard, Stone, Carlson is a nice way to get exposure to the power play and the top line. Now using flyers, I think Craig Anderson's been playing GPP. He's a little pricey, 7,700, but I think it's a GPP option for me. So let's move on to the next game of the night. We have the Detroit Red Wings traveling to Tampa Bay to face the Lightning. Listen, Detroit's not a very good team. They're not a very good defensive team. Tampa Bay 1 is very expensive. Stamkos is 7,700. Kucherov, I believe, is the most expensive player on the board tonight. The most expensive skater on the board at 8,200. Nemestikov does provide a little salary relief at 5,300. But, if you're going to fit them in, you do have to get a little creative. Again, they're matchup proof, and now they're in a really good matchup. I'm not really sure what we're going to see for ownership because they are expensive. I think a way to combat that, obviously you can differentiate in the second line. I think another way to do it is full stack the line. I don't think many people use Nemestikov. I think they prefer to, put in a cheaper single bullet like Clayton Keller. He's $300 cheaper, or someone in like the 4,500 range, something like that, just to free up some salary. I think the line as a whole, even if you see Stamkos and Kucherov at 20+%, I think the line as a whole you probably can get for around 10% if you use Nemestikov. If you play those three, it's going to be almost impossible to fit Hedman in at 5,900 unless you use a really cheap second line. So that's another way to differentiate yourself. Use those four. I think those four as a whole, you'll definitely get as a whole under 10%, even if they are each individually over 10, 15%. And I think that's a good way to combat the ownership. You want to use Sergachev at 4,000, okay. He's been playing well. He doesn't get too many minutes on the ice, but you can go there. For me, on the Detroit side, I don't have too much interest. Tampa Bay is very good defensively. Vasi's been great. I think you can use Vasi in cash. In GPPs, he is very expensive, 8,400. So if you're using Tampa Bay, you're using Hedman, you're using Vasi, you're going to have to get pretty creative to fill out the rest of your lineup. But I think Kucherov is firmly in play in every format. Stamkos is in play in every format. Nemestikov, GPP. If you're using Tampa Bay, I wouldn't use him as a one-off because he doesn't shoot the puck too much. He's more of a distributor on that line. So on the Detroit side, you want to have some Zetterberg, okay. You want to have some Larkin, okay. I think I'm going to fade the Red Wings tonight. Even the second line of Tampa Bay interests me. Going back to the Lightning for a second, Point. I believe Palat is in tonight. I think he was questionable. And who are they with? Oh, Yanni Gord. You want to go there for some salary relief if you're using, say, like Pittsburgh or Edmonton or Dallas, like teams like that. You can use the second line. I think those two lines are in play. You want to use Tyler Johnson as a one-off. I can get behind that. He sees power play time. But again, on the Detroit side, I don't have too much interest in this team. Gonna probably full fade. Got to see their lines. I think, what's his name, is back. Andreas Athanasiou, I believe, is going to suit up tonight. He's 4,300. So if you're thinking about using Detroit in a GPP, they're going to be extremely low owned. Just make sure you check daily faceoff for the lines, because if Athanasiou is back, I'm not sure how that affects the lines. Sorry, I had a delay of game there. My internet kind of went crazy. Again, so Vassie, in play for me in any format, 8,400. Jimmy Howard doesn't have too much interest in me. Definitely not in cash. You want to be crazy and use him as a GPP flyer. Okay. I'm not going to do it. I'm probably going to have a full Dallas fade. Hold on. Okay, let's move on to the next game of the night. We have the Anaheim Ducks facing the Florida Panthers. Sorry, my screen just loaded. I think both top lines are in play tonight. You're probably going to get them at lower ownership. Getzlaff, Raquel, that line is in play for me. Again, I'm not a huge Ducks guy. They're expensive. I think because they're expensive and there's better spots like Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, stuff like that, they're going to go a little overlooked, and I think they're a good play tonight. They're facing Reimer, and the backup to Reimer is our boy in the DFS community, Anthony Niemi. You want to use, I think, Cam Fowler's out, so Montour is definitely my preferred play on the blue line. Gibson 7,900. I think he's in play in GPP, especially if you're not going to use Florida. Reimer, if you're not using the Ducks, I think you can take a flyer. He's been pretty good in GPP only. On the Florida side, I do like the top line, Barkov, Huberdeau, and Dadonov. You want to use Trocheck again. He's a good one-off. Verbata is a good one-off. He shoots the puck a bunch. You want to use the Ducks second line. I think that's stretching a little bit, but I think you can. Selferberg, that line. Again, I'm not a huge Ducks guy, but if you want to dig, since Florida does give up a lot of points, you can go there. I think you can get them at pretty low ownership. Florida, I think Ekblad's my preferred play on the blue line. You want to use Yandel, that's cool too. Again, middle of the road interest in Florida for me. I think the Ducks are a sneaky good play tonight. They're 20,000 to stack. They're a little bit cheaper than Tampa Bay. They're a little more expensive than Pittsburgh. I think this is a good spot for them to get them at low ownership. Let's go on to the next game of the night. We have the Minnesota Wild at home against the Islanders. Dubnyk against Greiss. I think my preferred play would be the top line of Minnesota. Mikko Koivu, Granlund, and Zucker. They would definitely be my preferred target, even though they're up against the Tavares line tonight. Tavares line on the road isn't very good defensively. After that, again, the Wild's depth gets pretty bad. They are kind of starting to get healthier. Niederreiter started skating again. He's obviously not going to be back tonight. He might be back next week. But again, if you're using Minnesota, it's that top line for me or bust. You can use them with Suter, 5,400, Spurgeon, 4,700. On the flip side, the top line of the Islanders is in play. They were the play on Tuesday. They were at home, though. I don't like them as much on the road, but they're still a very nice option. Tavares, Lee, and Eberle. If you want to use the depth line like Barzal, Beauvillier, and Josh Bailey. I think that's a good option because they're not going to see the Koivu line, and Minnesota's a little suspect defensively after that. I think that's a decent option where you can save some salary. Again, on the blue line, I'm not a huge fan of the Islanders defenders because you never know what's going to come from. Adam Pelech had 3 assists last game. I wouldn't expect that from him. Letty's 4,200. He's in play. Boychuk 3,900. I think there's better spots, but if you're going to use the Islanders, I think Letty is the guy. Both goalies are in play for me on GPP. Dubnyk and Greiss are both 7,600. If you're not using the other team, obviously. I think my preferred play is Dubnyk just because they're at home. I think Greiss is a good GPP option. I think he's going to go lower owned. So I like that there. Let's move on to the second to last game of the night. We have the Dallas Stars traveling to Edmonton to face the Oilers. A couple line changes here. Brett Ritchie moves up to the top line for Dallas with Sagan and Ben. And Leon Draisaitl is back up with the top line with Maroon and McDavid. And Yamamoto is a healthy scratch tonight. So this game's probably going to be pretty heavily targeted. I think Edmonton 1 is my preferred play. But they're both like up there for me. Edmonton, they're going to be pretty pricey with Draisaitl back up. So, I mean, again, the top lines tonight, like the top lines to target, are very expensive. So it's not like you can mash them together. I think, again, Dallas is a better defensive team, but again, McDavid's matchup proof. I do like this spot tonight. Even though Dallas is improving, I still think it's a great spot for Edmonton. If you want to, get a little... I think, people might leave Maroon off just because they can find someone cheaper as a one-off. So you want to get them at a lower ownership, you go there. You full stack the line with Clefbaum, who's always in play, and he's still 5,300. Top line for Dallas is in play for me, especially with Brett Ritchie. Definitely gives some salary relief there. Ritchie's only 3,600. Remains to be seen if he's going to stay there the whole night. Radulov moved down to the third line. They could flip-flop, but for 3,600, I think it's a solid way to get exposure to a top line. Say again, 7,600, and Ben is 7,300, so they're cheaper. That line as a whole is going to be cheaper. I think they're in a good spot. Edmonton's PK is bad. Defensively, they're not very good. If you want to use secondary lines, I'm not really a fan of either team's secondary line. I mean, you want to use Matthias Janmark with Spezza. Okay, they're really cheap, but they don't see too much time on the ice, so that concerns me a little bit. You want to use Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Lucic. They come up against depth lines of the Stars. I can see it. I don't mind that at all. If you can fit Klingberg at 6,300, he is definitely my preferred play. Essel Lindell, 3,300, is a solid spot to save some salary. Also on the Edmonton side, if you want to use Darnell Nurse at 3,200, I think that's a spot to save some salary. But that's really about it. I mean, the top lines are definitely in play for me. You want to use the secondary lines because they're cheaper and you're not going to see the top defensive matchups. That's a good way to get exposure to a high over-under game and not get high ownership. Ben Bishop at 7,400 is an interesting play. Occasionally, the Oilers do struggle to score, but that was when Draisaitl was out. Now he's with McDavid. That line is dynamic, so I definitely wouldn't use Bishop in cash. You want to use him as a low-owned option in GPPs. I would have minimal exposure, but he does have he's one of those goalies who can take over a game. There's definitely better spots to go with Neuwirth at 7,400, Price at 7,300. So I think I won't have much, if any, of Bishop. Same for me with Talbot. He's 7,300. I think I prefer to go Price. But again, if you're using Edmonton, you want to use Talbot. You think they're going to win again. GPP only. So let's move on to the final game of the night. We have the Washington Capitals traveling to Vancouver. to face the Canucks. Andre Burakovsky broke a finger. He's on IR. This is an interesting game. I think it's going to get overlooked. I wish I had more interest because I think they're going to be very low owned because of it. I mean, obviously, I think I saw somewhere that Backstrom is going to be a game time decision, and I think that's going to be difficult, especially on FanDuel without late swap. I don't know if you can risk it. You want to use. So, for me, if I'm playing on FanDuel, even if I'm playing on DK because it's the only late game and he's a game time decision, you won't know until after the second to last game locks because warm-ups for this game are at 9:30 and the last game besides this one locks at 9, so it's going to be, you won't really have anywhere to swap. So I think the play there would use Kuznetsov and Ovechkin, that line. Carlson seeing 1 million minutes on the ice still. Orlov, you can go there. If you're on DK, and I wouldn't, I'm not sure I'd risk using the Backstrom on FanDuel, especially because it's so late. But if you're on DK and you want to risk that and you think he's going to play, I think that you're going to get them very low on Backstrom, Oshie, and who they would. I think is it still Tom? If it's Tom Wilson, you can leave him off. But yeah, you're going to get them very low owned. But if he is ruled out, I guess you can swap to Kuznetsov. I guess Kuznetsov and Oshie do share power play time, so I guess it's not the worst swap. Or you can go to Vancouver, but you're going to leave a ton of salary on the table again. Holtby at 8,100 is an interesting play. I think he's in play in GPPs. I'm not sure I go there in cash. I mean, you can. I think I wouldn't. Just, I don't know. If Backstrom's out, he's their best defensive center. I think Vancouver, even though they're bad, they do have the ability to score at home. My preferred play would be Horvat, Barchi, and Brock Bozier. They're insanely cheap. They let you get whatever you want. Del Zotto still the play for me. He's 4,000. I'm not sure who's in goal for Vancouver tonight. I think they could be sneaky, especially if Backstrom's out. If it's Markstrom at 6,900 or Nielsen at 6,800, I think if you really need salary, they're the place to go. Again, so that's the 11-game slate. I'm sorry if I seemed a little rushed. My phone is blowing up. But let's go over everything real quick here. Top goalies for me in cash. Vasi, I think, is in play. He's expensive though, 8,400. I think he would be my cash goalie play. GPPs, obviously you can have some exposure to Holtby. I like Freddie Anderson tonight. Craig Anderson, Dubnyk, and then Neuwirth and Price. I think after that would be, taking a risk on GPPs. Top stacks for me. Obviously, both of the top two lines for Pittsburgh are in play for me. Again, I prefer to go the power play stack from using Pittsburgh. I think that's a better way to get exposure. If not, you want to one off. I think Malkin's the guy over Crosby. Tampa Bay is always in play, the top line. We talked about them. I love the Rangers tonight. Winnipeg. These are all expensive lines. Edmonton, Dallas. So if you need some salary, or even the Ducks too, I think they're in a sneaky good spot. So if you need some salary, I like the Arizona 1 against Pavlik. Vancouver, I guess they're the second line, the Horvat line. They're extremely cheap. What else? There's some other cheap lines. I mean, Kings 2 is an interesting spot to save some salary. Depth lines in the Edmonton-Dallas game. the Islanders second line, the Panthers second line, the Ducks second line. But again, my top stacks are expensive, being Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, Rangers, Arizona, Ducks, and Winnipeg. So, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter. We also have the premium projections and the optimizer 80s line matching articles going premium, so make sure you hop in that, because you get everything. You get the projections, you get the optimizer, you get the article, you get premium chat. So make sure to check out Daily Faceoff for lines and goalies. So I'll see you in chat tonight at 5:45. See you later, guys. Hopefully you're winning some money tonight.